What would you ask a lawyer if you could ask them anything? My brother and I opened up an answering machine to allow friends and family to do just that. The questions we received were remarkable. So remarkable, in fact, that we decided to turn them into a podcast. Now, while this podcast isn't legal advice and it's just for fun, we think you're really going to like what you hear. With that being said, my name's Nathan Beam, and I help run a personal injury law firm in Melbourne, Florida.
My name's Riley Beam, and I'm a personal injury attorney.
And from the law offices of Douglas R. Beam, this is Good Questions for Bad Days.
If I have a child who were to, on a playground or at school or daycare, bite another child pretty severely, what would I be responsible for legally? Does it change depending on whether it is at a playground or a school or daycare? Yeah, thank you.
Well, if you're watching your kid and you look away, or you know your child's a aggressive little guy or girl and likes to fight and do these things, and the more you're on notice about your child's behavior, the more duty you have to protect the public from your child. If your child hurts somebody else and you're watching them, you're responsible for that injury. And a lot of those injuries can be covered by homeowners insurance. You have a duty to watch the child. But you can be negligent from that too. You're being negligent in your supervision of the child. So even if it's an intentional act from the child, you could potentially be responsible for it in your role as a parent.
It's interesting. So I know in a previous podcast, we talked about the idea of dogs and how dogs are understood as property. So if your dog runs out, in the scenario of the caller, the dog ran out, hit someone on the street, and then the dog was essentially being sued, but it was the owner of the dog. Right. Is that similar with children? Like, is there a timeline in which children are understood as, what does that look like?
Well, if you think about it as your duty, you have a duty when you have a child, or you have an animal, or you have a car, or you have anything, you have a duty to protect or keep other people safe. Those people didn't assume the duty. You have it. So when your child goes out and hurts someone, your duty is to be aware that they can do that, and if you don't stop them and take steps to make sure that doesn't happen, you can be at fault. Now, it's a little, the dog being kind of, you're strictly liable for your dog's acts. There might be a little more nuance with the child. But you could have arguments about, was it a mutual fight between kids, or was it this or that? And, who was supposed to be watching the child? So there's a little bit more of duty shifting that can go on with a child. But, just make sure your kid, if they are engaging in certain behaviors that are dangerous to other people, take extra steps to protect, people from your own offspring, your seed.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, well, just an extreme example. Let's say your child is going through a really weird phase and is biting everything. Full-blown Hannibal Lecter, just, chomping at the bits, wants to bite everything in its sight. And this is happening for several months.
Yeah, we got kids. They all go through stages. They all can be bullies, or they can be bullied, So, but if you have a kid who's going through a rough time, and it's very obvious and it needs some sort of corrective action that's beyond your control, it's good to talk to medical professionals about it. There may be something more going on with the child that you need to take care of. That's a good step to kind of prevent other people from being hurt. You may want to limit who your child's around until this is done, especially if it's, really susceptible people, whether it's elderly or very young, like infants, So you'll want to limit who you're around with that. And that's really hard when you're a parent. You want your kid to, part of your kid getting better is maybe being around other kids. So you just want to keep a watchful eye. And this, I'm not parent of the year or anything here, but some of the stuff you think about, as being a parent, being a good parent, taking active steps to prevent that. And another thing too is you could be liable for a bite. But think about who the child's biting and what kind of damage it's doing. So if they're biting an adult, it's going to hurt. They're going to take care of their wound. It's not going to get infected, kind of a thing. So, the damages there that the child could do are pretty low. But again, if they're around an older person, they could push the person over. And you just got to really think about what's the damage my kid can do if I'm going to be around other people. So, those are maybe a little bit common sense, but if I were to bring a claim as a plaintiff's lawyer against a parent with a bad kid, I would ask all those questions. What are you doing? You're the parent. You're responsible for your kid. What steps are you taking? What are you aware of? Why didn't you stop that earlier? Because you knew your child could hurt someone else, but you still put them in that position. So, from my perspective, that's what I'd be asking. That's what I'd be asking if my own child was hurt. I'd be asking the other parent, what's going on here? Why are you letting this happen? Yeah. So it's a lot of it's common sense, right? But when you hear it and you go, okay, I need to take some changes with my kid, and may mean moving them to different schools. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and they're never easy things to do. And it's upsetting. So, that's what I would recommend.
It takes a village. That's the old adage, right? And I think it applies really well here. If you're facing any of these issues, reach out to your support system, to medical providers, and we think they'll provide you with some really great assistance. If you're facing a legal issue, particularly a personal injury one, call us. With over $100 million in settlements and verdicts for families in Central Florida, we've gotten pretty good at what we do. And in the 35 years we've been open, the reviews and the word from the community, I think, is representative of that. So if you're facing any sort of legal issue, you should call us. If we can't help you, there's a really good chance that we know someone who can. And hey, if you're an attorney who's listening to this podcast and is looking for co-counsel in Florida, you should also give us a call. We regularly work on multi-million-dollar cases and would be happy to help. You can reach us at 321-723-6591 or at dougbeam.com. And from all of us, the law office of Douglas R. Beam, we really appreciate you listening, and we're looking forward to answering more good questions for bad days.